If you haven't read The Knight in Rusty Armor, you are in for a treat. I mean, it's the typical fairy tale story, but with a major twist. I mean, it's always the knight in shining armor. So what does it mean, the knight in rusty armor? Well, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the beginning, get you intrigued of how amazing this book is, and then you can go and read or listen to it yourself, The Knight in Rusty Armor. It starts off with this knight, and he goes out and he wants to go and fight all these battles. Well, he puts on this armor, and he goes out, fights this battle, and he loves it so much. And he comes back and he gets all this recognition. Everybody loves him. He's like, oh man, I want to go out and do that again. So he doesn't even mind he doesn't even care about not taking off the armor. He goes ahead, fights the next battle. And he comes back and he fights the next battle. And he just keeps on fighting all these battles. And he fights so many battles and so many people love him for it that he just decides to keep his armor on. Well, one day, after months and months, after years, he ends up getting married. Well, he was already married before this point. And several months down the road, his wife's like, man, I feel like you don't even care about me anymore. You're never around Cristobal and myself anymore, and that's his son, and it feels like you don't even care about us. He's like, oh, I care about you. And she's like, no, all you care about is fighting your battles, getting recognized, and your stupid armor. And he's like, that's not true. And she's like, okay, I haven't even seen your face in months. How about you show me your face? And he's like, I can if I want to. She's like, okay, go ahead, do it. Well, he goes, tries to take it off, and it won't come off. The armor itself won't come off. He's like, I'm really trying. She's like, oh, you're really trying to take off your armor? He's like, yeah, I am. I promise. She's like, well, why don't you go ahead and do it? He's like, I can't. And she's like, oh, yeah, sure. Okay, that's how it is. If you care about your armor more than me and Cristobal, then we're leaving. And she leaves. And he's so sad. And he goes to the jester, and he's like, hey, can you help me try to figure this out? And there's so many funny characters in this. The jester's like making fun of him, and he's trying to just figure it out. He doesn't have any ill intentions at all. And so you're trying to figure out, like, why is his wife being unreasonable with him? Why are these people being unreasonable with him? Well, the jester says, I think if you go into the woods and find Myrtle, the wizard, he can help you. He's the only one who knows how to take off this armor, because it's rusted, or that it's come on so tight, like that it stayed on there, that it's been like glued onto him. He can't get it off. So he ends up going to Myrtle in the woods. And Myrtle is this hilarious guy, and he talks in all these riddles and stuff, and he's like, I just care about my wife. He's like, if you cared about your wife so much, then why were you always going and fighting battles? And he's like, I was fighting battles so I could give them more castles. And he's like, well, why? What's important? So what's so great about a castle if you can't enjoy it with your own family? And he starts to look on the inside of him, and he starts to cry. And this is the first time that he's cried in years. He's not a crying guy. And he's like, I realized that I've only thought about myself for all these years and getting recognition, and I haven't thought about my wife and my son. And he starts crying, and as he's crying, the water from his tears starts to break down the metal, and a piece of his armor falls off. And he's like, oh my gosh, look at that. That was the secret. And he finds out that by being vulnerable, by overcoming his fears, he's able to take off this armor that he thought had been protecting him this entire time, and it hadn't. It had been restricting him. He put the armor on himself that had been restricting him this whole time. Well, he goes on this quest, and he has all these different steps of finding out the inner man in himself. And it's such an amazing story. It's a very short story, but one of my very favorite books of all time about personal development, working on myself. I highly recommend it to you, and I'm very excited. If you've read the book, please leave a comment below on how the book has changed your life. If you haven't read it, please highly recommend it. The link is below. Highly recommend reading this book.